There have been some freaks of nature in the history of the NBA. Shaq, Magic Johnson, LeBron James, Wilt Chamberlain. But not every player is as lucky with having the natural size of an NBA player. I think it's safe to say that the players that aren't as lucky have to work that much harder to get on the same level as the naturally gifted players. And when they perform just as good or even better, it makes it that much more impressive. So we're going to be looking at the 12 most undersized players in NBA history. And you'll see that being short isn't the only thing that can classify someone as an undersized player. So with that being said, let's get started with number 12, Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace was one of the NBA's greatest centers and one of the best defenders all time, all at only 6 foot 9 inches tall. He made up for his lack of height with his strength and toughness. He was stronger than most centers in the NBA, so he wouldn't get back down easily, and Ben was an extremely smart player with great timing and positioning for rebounding and blocking shots. He was never given a chance to show what he could really do because he went drafted out of a Division II school. But he finally made it to the NBA and didn't truly show his potential until he was traded to the Detroit Pistons. While he was there, he developed and became a 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, a 5-time member of the All-Defensive First Team, and at only 6 foot 9, he'd be a 2-time rebounding leader and a leader in blocked shots. Ben Wallace never averaged double digits in points because his height affected his scoring, but it didn't at all affect his skill away from the offensive side. He averaged 3.5 blocks one season and 15 rebounds a game in another. Can you just imagine if Ben was a little bit taller? He'd probably be close to as dominant as Shaq. Number 11, Muggsy Bogues. Standing at 5 foot 3 inches tall, Muggsy Bogues is the shortest player to ever play in the NBA, which makes him the most undersized player in history. Bogues had a 44-inch vertical, and the only reason he couldn't dunk a basketball was because his hands were too small to hold the ball to dunk it one-handed. But not only could he jump high, he was one of the fastest players on the court at all times. He used his height to his advantage, helping him run past players, sneak in for the steal, and fly down the court on the fast break. And it's not like Muggsy was the shortest player ever and only played a couple of games in the NBA. He was in the NBA for 15 seasons. He averaged 7 points and 7 assists a game, and was a part of one of the more popular teams in NBA history that consisted of himself, Alonzo, Mourning, and Larry Johnson. Nothing is confirmed to this rumor, but it was said that Muggsy did dunk one time in a pre-game practice. Number 10, Spud Webb. The 5'6", 133-pound point guard out of Dallas, Texas. In 7th grade, he was told he was too small to play basketball, and in 8th grade, he got his chance when 2 players didn't complete their physical in time for the first game. So in that first game, Spud scored 20 points, and he could dunk by the time he was 5'3". Later on, when Spud Webb played varsity, he averaged 26 points a game. He played for a small school and led them to a junior college national title. In college, he had a 42-inch vertical, so a lot of people thought he'd play for the Harlem Globetrotters because he'd be an entertaining player to watch. But instead, back when the NBA draft had 7 rounds, Spud was picked in the 4th round with the 87th overall pick in the draft. And just like Muggsy Bogues, Spud Webb used his quickness and his vertical to his advantage. He averaged 16 points and 7 assists a game one season, and 9 points and 5 assists for his career. He exceeded all expectations in his career by proving everyone wrong and making the most out of his career as a basketball player, with his biggest accomplishment being beating Dominique Wilkins in the 1986 dunk contest, becoming the shortest person to ever win it. Number 9, Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman was a 6'7", 220-pound power forward. That's a little undersized, but not too bad. But the fact that he was that tall and he was the greatest rebounder of all time makes him undersized. And I think it has something to do with him growing almost a foot taller after high school, because as a short kid all of his life, he probably had to learn how to rebound extremely good to have any chance at getting the ball. And then when he grew up to become a 6'7" guy with extremely good rebounding skills, it made him dominant. So this led to him leading the NBA in rebounds for 7 years in a row with an average of 16 a game through that span. This put him as an important piece of Michael Jordan's Bulls teams and led to him having some of the most insanely strange and unique stat lines in NBA history, recording 26 rebounds and 0 points in one game. Number 8, Charles Barkley. It's a little weird to say that Barkley is undersized because what he lacks in height, he makes up for in width.
Wait till you see the... No.
But Charles Barkley is one of the best power forwards to ever play the game, standing at only 6 foot 6 inches tall, with some reports saying he was only 6'4". Early on in Barkley's junior year of high school, he was 5'10", 220 pounds, and came off the bench for his varsity team. But that year he grew to be 6 foot 4 inches tall, and then averaged 19 points and 18 rebounds a game as a starter. He had the attention of no college scouts until he played against Alabama's most recruited player at the time, Bobby Lee Hurt, and scored 26 points on him. A coach at Auburn said that day he saw a fat guy who could play like the wind. Charles struggled with his weight throughout his career, but as an undersized 6'6" power forward, I think his situation was similar to Rodman's, that he learned how to play as a small kid, so when he suddenly got taller it was easier for him to rebound and play with the people around his size. Barkley won MVP, was an 11-time All-Star, a member of the Dream Team, and averaged 22 points and 11 rebounds a game for his career. Number 7. Manute Bol. I know, you're probably waiting for me to say I'm just kidding, but no, the tallest NBA player of all time is on this list. He might be 7'7" tall, but look at him, he only weighed 200 pounds, which makes him undersized. Compare that to Shaq, who weighed over 300 pounds during his career, or to Dwight Howard, who weighs 265, or to even Russell Westbrook that weighs the same as Manute at 200. Manute Bol wasn't a great player. Since he weighed so much less than the other centers and power forwards, he could barely ever score. As a center, he couldn't back his way down to the basket or establish position. But what he couldn't do on the offensive end, he definitely made up for on the defensive end. He was an insane shot blocker and one of the best the league has ever seen. He played 10 years in the NBA, averaged 2 points a game for his career, but 5 blocks a game one season and 3.3 blocks for his entire career, which gave him the second highest career average. Number 6. Kevin Durant. Following the same guidelines that were used for Manute, Kevin Durant is a 6'11" small forward, so he's nowhere near undersized in terms of height, and even in terms of weight, he's not as undersized as I thought. Comment in the comments right now how much you'd say Kevin Durant weighs. Go ahead, I'll wait. Okay, well he weighs 240 pounds. If you got that right, you either cheated and looked it up, you know way too much about Kevin Durant, or you just had a good guess. But 240 pounds is the same as Carmelo Anthony, and he only weighs 10 pounds less than LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Looking at Durant, I was thinking he was at least the same as Manute at 200 and maybe 210. But anyways, back to the point, he's not undersized in height and barely in weight, but the man needs to hit the gym. He famously, or infamously, was the only one at the NBA Draft Combine that couldn't bench 185 pounds, and he had the 3rd worst vertical leap and the 4th worst sprint time. Not much has changed since then. He's put on a little size since his rookie season, but not too much. But hey, who needs to work out when you're one of the best in the league already? Number 5. Earl Boykins. Earl was never a star player or a dunk contest champion, but the man stood at 5'5" tall and was only 135 pounds. He played within a span of 14 years in the NBA, and his career started off slow, getting undrafted and then only signing 10-day contracts for the first couple of years, but finally spent most of his career with the Nuggets. He only started 34 out of 652 games played, but he did have a couple of seasons averaging about 14 points a game. Just like most of the other small players, he used his quickness to get by, but he didn't have the most impressive vertical. Instead, the rumor was that Earl Boykins could bench press 315 pounds, which is almost like 3 times his body weight. I mean, I'll have to see that to believe it, but a lot of the rumors like that turn out to be true. It's crazy all the people like Anthony Bennett and Kwame Brown with the perfect sized bodies for the NBA that couldn't make it, and then there's players like Earl Boykins who casually have a 12-year career. Number 4. Larry Johnson. Standing as a 6'6" power forward, Larry Johnson was a star in college, winning the National Junior College Athletic Association Division I Player of the Year award in his freshman and sophomore seasons, and then transferring to the NCAA, where he led his team to the NCAA championship, and in his next season finished with a 27-0 record, before being named the Naismith Player of the Year and given the Wooden Award. Since then, Larry's been one of the more underrated players in NBA history, but I think that'd have to do with the fact that he really only had about 5 good seasons in the NBA before he got traded from the Hornets to the Knicks. On the Hornets, he played with Muggsy Bogues from earlier, and not only did they have 2 undersized players, but they also had Alonzo Mourning, who was a 6'9" center that could have, but didn't make this list. But yeah, Larry was a part of the popular Charlotte Hornets in the 90s and helped them in the playoffs, and averaged 16 points a game for his career. But after having problems with Alonzo Mourning, both players were traded from the Hornets, and that broke up their team. After joining the Knicks, Larry was never really the same player, but for being a 6'6" power forward, he definitely made the most out of his basketball career, especially early on. Number 3. Nate Robinson and Isiah Thomas. I put both in number 3 because even though they're completely different players, they're the same height. Starting first with Nate. He stands at 5'9" tall and has done some incredible things as one of the most undersized players the NBA has seen. Nate makes up for being small by being extremely athletic with a 43-inch vertical that helped him dunk for the first time at 13 years old, block people like Yao Ming and LeBron, and win the dunk contest 3 times, dunking over Dwight Howard. He was a bench player for pretty much his entire career, and it was a spot he played great in. He averaged 17 points a game one season and 11 a game for his career. Nate's always been a small player, and it never really affected him in terms of on the court because he was so quick and he could jump so high. And as for Isiah Thomas, it's weird to watch him play because he's only 5'9" and he's quick, but he doesn't really use any insane athleticism or high jumping in his game. He plays just like a normal point guard, which makes watching him even more insane. He averaged almost 29 points a game last year, and he's been getting better every year, so he'll have some rust on him when he returns from his injury, but who knows how good he'll be after that. He's a great shooter and an extremely smart and crafty player with the ball, which helps you forget how tall he really is. Isiah Thomas is one of those players that makes you wonder how good he'd really be if he was just a few inches taller. Number 2. Wes Unseld. I can't say too much about a player that played in the 60s and 70s, but what I can look at is his stats and his achievements throughout his time in the NBA. He was a 6'7" center who was a rebounding leader, MVP, NBA champion, finals MVP, and shorter than most other centers in NBA history. He competed with other centers like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton, Wilt Chamberlain, and Moses Malone. West was a monster for his size. He averaged 18 rebounds and 13 points a game in his rookie season, and 10 points and 14 rebounds a game for his whole career. In a 1970 playoff series against the Knicks, who had Hall of Famers Dave DeBusschere and Willis Reed, West averaged 10 points and 24 rebounds a game. He was said to have been able to rebound so well due to his brute strength, similar to Ben Wallace. And in his career, he would lead his team to 4 NBA finals and win one of them. As an undersized center, he clearly dominated a lot more than he should have. Number 1. Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson was either an undersized shooting guard or an average-sized point guard. But since Iverson played shooting guard for the majority of his career, and the fact that at only 6 feet tall and 165 pounds, Allen was as great as he was, I think we can say that he was undersized for the amount of skill that he had. He's the shortest ever MVP and put up insane numbers throughout his career. And he's also the shortest ever first overall pick since the 1951 NBA draft. He averaged 33 points a game one season, 26 for his career, led the league in steals for 3 seasons, and was an 11-time All-Star. Iverson was a smaller player, but he made up for it with his 41-inch vertical and his killer crossover. These skills have led him to being one of the all-time great players in NBA history, all while being undersized, which makes it even more of an accomplishment. So that will conclude this list of the 12 most undersized players in the history of the NBA. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, comment what you thought of this list and if there's any players I might have missed, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos coming soon.